Let me get you into the Flyers trade, because I know that there are people who cared for some reason about the two guys coming back, and I don't. I really don't. One is an underachieving first rounder. Cool. Kuzmenko is maybe a little bit interesting, and there were people reading between the lines on Kuzmenko and him having to waive his no movement clause, and that apparently, allegedly, reportedly, he had been reached out to by either Briere Jones, a combination of the two, somebody from within the Flyers, and he was convinced to waive that clause because he was told that it would be worth it and they need him. And people tried to read between the lines and say, oh, does that mean that Kuzmenko's here to be the Mishkov whisperer because they had both played together in the past? Is it because Kuzmenko had previously played with Elias Pettersson and that maybe Danny Briere's about to go, big fish hunting or whatever, big game hunting, and go out and make a deal for Elias Pettersson? The other guy from Vancouver that had been rumored to be on the trade block, potentially JT Miller, has since been traded to the Rangers. Will that now stop Vancouver from exploring the market for a Pettersson suitor? I don't know. Has Pettersson really worn out his welcome in Vancouver? I don't know. Do I think the Flyers will have interest? I think most teams would. I did check in on the Press Row Show on Thursday night. I listened to Ant and to Bill Meltzer pretty much say they don't believe that Pettersson could be a number 1C on a Stanley Cup contending team. I'd argue that he is significantly better than anybody they have, and that even at a $12 million cap hit, he still is probably going to be worth that money because, oh, by the way, the cap is going to now go up for 3 straight years. And I know that some people don't like the cap argument, but if you look at cap percentage, that $12 million cap hit, it's still going to hurt, and it's still going to be one of the biggest ones on your cap for the next few years. But eventually, $12 million could potentially look like a bargain if he gets back to 95, 100-point pace Elias Pettersson. Now, is that still the guy who ultimately leads you to a Stanley Cup final and wins it? I don't know. But I would certainly like that Flyers team better. I'd certainly like them with an actual 1C. This, to me, isn't like trying to sell the fan base on Kevin Hayes, right? Because if you go back to it, I used to say Kevin Hayes was like a 2.5C, maybe a 3C. But they brought Kevin Hayes in part because they didn't know what they could get from Nolan Patrick. They didn't know if Nolan Patrick was ready, so they were like, oh, he could be, like a 1.5C. He could sometimes be your top line center and sometimes be a 2C. And we're like, no, that doesn't work. Kevin Hayes is like a third line center. I look at Pettersson and I say, at worst, he's the best 2C in the league. Is like where he should be. And I'd say that in most cases, he's probably a 1C. Now, will the Flyers actually go and execute a trade, or will they wait until the offseason to get in on the action? I don't know. I think that there's a case to be made here that you're smarter if you're the Flyers to wait until the offseason for a Pettersson move, and that maybe the cost comes down. But it's hard to say. Here's the one thing that you do have if you're the Flyers. You have cap space. Because Kuzmenko coming back, he's a UFA at the end of the year. You had Morgan Frost coming up as a restricted free agent. You had Joel Farabee with multiple years left at a $5 million cap hit. If you were to just simply extend Morgan Frost the same rate, you are now saving, going on into the future for the next few years, $7.5 million at the very least on your cap. If you just carry this year's cap hits forward, $7.5 million now just gone off the cap. $7.5 million. You know that you have dead money and you have retained money coming off the cap. Flyers, I think, are going to have about $30 million in cap space as currently constituted right now going into this offseason. And the question has come up time and time again. Did Matvei Mishkov coming over early change the team's plan? Now, I've been critical, okay? I have been critical because I don't think the Flyers have been perfectly clear about what it is they're trying to do. I think there's been mixed messaging. Here I am criticizing clarity, and I can't even get mixed messaging out. But I think that the Flyers, for better or worse, have kind of been their own worst enemy on the messaging of whether this is a rebuild, a retool, something. Because you'll get Tortorella, and Tortorella, to his credit, in the last couple of days, said rebuild. Danny doesn't really say rebuild. Jonesy doesn't really say rebuild. They kind of imply that this is certainly more of an involved process. But if you're like rebuild heavy, I don't know. Do you then make it a point that every time you have a press conference, you say rebuild? I don't know. I'm not going to hold Danny Briere's feet to the fire for not explicitly saying rebuild at his last press conference or at the mid-season press conference. But like, I think that they've probably done themselves a little bit of a disservice because I don't think the messaging has been entirely clear. And the reason that I say it's been unclear is because the fan base as a whole doesn't seem to have an idea, or at least prior to this trade, didn't seem to have a clear idea of where this team was headed. And we know that because in the comment section of this show, the comment section of Snow the Goalie, we get this very, I don't want to say it's like a bipolar thing because it's not, but you get this like diametric difference between the people who think, oh, they're definitely rebuilding, the people who think, oh, they're definitely afraid to tear it down, and they're just going to try to like patch it. So you can't have those two groups of people existing if you've been totally clear. That's not how this works. All right? Now, I think that after this trade of Frost and Farabee, one thing has become abundantly clear. The goal isn't to win this year. Now, I don't think they've ever given you the indication that the goal is to win. I criticized, and I will once again say fairly, I fairly criticized the notion, the public comments around saying the players will decide. Because whether or not GMs have to say shit. Coaches have to say shit. Players have to say shit. How much of it they believe, I don't know. And I brought this up 2 weeks ago on So the Goalie. And I asked Bundy, because Bundy's a former player. Like, does a guy who knows that he's on a team that isn't going to win a cup, does he really tell himself that, like, oh yeah, we can win the cup? He's like, yeah, they kind of do. And I said, well, that's delusional. And I guess you kind of have to be delusional if you're a pro player, because there aren't that many openings, and you have to tell yourself you're good enough to make it. But like, I live in reality. I live detached. All right? Like, I'm on a show that's partnered with the team, but like, I'm not state propaganda. You can't buy me. You can't buy my blind allegiance. I'm going to call things out when I see them, and when I think something is wrong, I'm going to say it. Sometimes that upsets people. Sometimes it upsets fans. Sometimes it upsets the Flyers. But you know what? I don't have to do this. I do this because I enjoy doing it, and I enjoy doing it because I like to be able to tell you people exactly what it is I think is happening and what I'd like to see and what I think a winner will look like. And so I am critical when I think it is warranted. And in the case of this move, oh, this is good. This is really good. Now, Morgan Frost scored a goal over the weekend, and there are already people panicking. Oh, no. Morgan Frost has gone to Calgary. Is Morgan Frost going to become that 1C that some of us always thought he could? Is Morgan Frost going to become the number 1C we all thought he would be? No, probably not. Now, is Morgan Frost going to prove to be a perfectly fine player in Calgary? Yeah. Will he probably earn himself a nice contract? I would think so. Is Joel Farabee going to be worth $5 million? Well, with the increased cap in a year or two, $5 million is going to look like a bargain deal for probably like not quite a fourth liner, but $5 million is not going to be a bad cap hit. And if he can go back to being like a 20-ish goal scorer, 30 goal, high side potential, yeah, it's a good deal for Calgary. But for the Flyers, it really is a salary dump. You could kind of be sold on the idea, like, will Kuzmenko help to pull something out of Mishkov? Maybe. Well, the other guy, I'm honestly just calling him the other guy because I'm not a believer right now, and I don't think that the point of the trade was either of the actual roster players. But like, to me, if it's a salary dump, great. But you know what else it does? Repeat after me. It lowers the ceiling, lowers the floor. All I have wanted, all I have advocated for 18 months, lower the ceiling, lower the floor. Take the best possible scenario and the worst possible scenario, lower them both. Take them like the grapes under the feet of the old Italian grandmothers in Tuscany. as they're crushing the grapes and making the wine. Lower the ceiling, lower the floor.